discussing the Dumore Corporation, could you explain what it is and its purposes?
Yes, I think I did there briefly. You probably can edit that out. But the purpose was to make the downtown area, and again, in particular around the square, to bring it, update it, and keep from having empty buildings, and to make them more attractive. We thought that we'd seen so many little towns where you go into and there are empty buildings, and the buildings are falling apart. And a good many of the buildings, at the time we started this, were owned by older people, namely the Tapman sisters owned 2 or 3, and some other people that didn't have any active business in their buildings and were not getting enough rent out of them to really spend any money on them. So what we did, as I said, we bought this building next door, which is now occupied by the Champagne Lawn building, and the one next to that, which is now occupied in part by Raycraft Drugstore. And then the Raycraft store is owned now by Manor Care Incorporated. And we renovated all these buildings and did the fronts. The Dumore Corporation did the fronts of the 2 buildings next to me, and I of course agreed to go along and do my own, which we did. And we think we've made a very nice looking facade out of these buildings. And you can tell now that that some of the buildings on the rest of the square have picked up the idea, and not exactly, but they've done a lot to them, and we're really not very active now. But and I must give credit where credit is due. The real ramrod in the Dumore Corporation, it was Keith Hudson, and he's the one that got all of us older men stirring. And really, without him, we'd probably be still talking about it, and that's a fact. And then, of course, he was at that time president of Americana Nursing Home Corporation, and they occupied a lot of the space on the second floors of these buildings, which, until we did this, were an absolute mess. I really mean that. That's just what they looked like. And now, with the installation of the elevator there and everything, they're very fine office spaces. They are now vacant, but because of the change in ownership of Americana.
Does the Dumore Corporation have they thought of looking for ways to stimulate new businesses coming into town?
No. Well, only mercantile businesses.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, the commercial business was the job of the Monticello Industrial Development Corporation, of which I was part of too. We are now liquidated for 2 reasons. The Industrial Development Corporation. First of all, we were only chartered for 20 years, and it's been about 18. Secondly, we sold all of the land that we had purchased for development, and it's out here south of town, where the Nabisco is the new one, the last one in there. And we liquidated it, as I said, for the reason our charter was about up, and secondly, all the officers are getting old, and several of them are retired, and we thought it's time now for the younger generation to take this over, and if they want to do it, fine, but we're tired.
Do you think there's a possibility? Can you see more businesses starting on the square? Do you foresee the town growing?
I foresee and I hope that we will continue to have the slow, steady growth that we've had for the last 15 or 20 years. The population has doubled since about 1946 or 7, something like that, at a rate of a few hundred a year. I see absolutely, personally, no advantage in having 2 more drugstores or anything of that nature here, unless there's something that's needed. I like this little town, and I have a very strong feeling for it. and I always have, and I always will. And you know, people tend to become complacent about what we have here, and particularly those of us that have lived here a long time, I think, sometime. But just look into the healthcare area. What we have here, we have the Kirby Hospital, we have the Tapman Village, and we have the Piatt County Nursing Home, which is the only one of them that costs anybody a dime. That is tax supported by the county, but the hospital in Tapman Village are all funded by the generosity and foresight of these pioneer people, or pioneer in this area anyway.
Oh, I think we're very fortunate. We have Allerton Park.
Allerton Park is probably, there couldn't be any greater attraction than that is for tourists to come through here. Look at our school system. And that's equivalent to a small college campus there, you know, what we have. Of course, we've been very fortunate in our tax situation over all these years. By the way, Mr. Dighton always took credit for whether it's true or not, Mr. William Dighton, for the fact that Illinois Power made this their home office.
Why did he take credit? Did he get him to come here?
That's what he said. Now, whether or not it's true, I have no reason to believe it wasn't. Somebody did, but he always said that he did. Now, I don't know. And that has been some blessing for this community.
Very much.
And look at the streets in this town. You compare those. Are just not the main arterial roads, but the side street in this whole town, and you compare those to Sullivan, any other town of comparable size, and you'd be amazed at what we have here. And our city government too, very capable hands.
Were you ever on the city council?
I've never been on the city council, and that's not all. I never will be.
You don't have any desire?
I have no desire for that job. That's we've had some very capable people serve on the city council. We've had some that weren't so capable. But we had Andy Anderson, the former president of the state bank, you know, was mayor for 10 or 12 years and did really a very fine job.
I'm curious, when airplanes became a common sight in this area, what kind of airplanes do you recall around as you were growing up?
Well, the only airplanes that I recall around here, there were the Piatt County Deep Rock Oil Company used to bring in a plane every year, and it was an old biplane, as I recall, and they'd land out here in what was Kratz's pasture, right, well, where Wilkie Field is now, right south of the schools. And they would give rides to their customers or people that would pay to go up. But airplanes weren't anything big around here. I mean, in this area, of course, my first flights really were during the war, and after that, on commercial airlines.
Do you? Someone told me that they recall seeing.
Probably.
But I was just curious about the commercial lines. Now, when did you start flying commercially out of Champaign?
Not too long ago, I don't believe. We used to train, you know. When I first started flying, we came into Midway Airport in Chicago, and then we'd take what was then the Wabash down here. And I suppose it's not over 20 years ago. That would be when? 1962? I expect that's about right. I can't tell you for sure. The Ozarks, you know, if there's a cloud in the sky, they don't fly. So whenever we're planning a trip, we go to Chicago the night before and fly out of O'Hare, because there were 5 couples of us were going down to Jamaica one year, and we were going up on that early plane to Chicago, and it didn't fly, so consequently we were a day late and had to change all our other flight reservations. So I never did that again.
Yeah. Well, it's been very nice talking to you, and I appreciate you letting me have the time.
Well, you're certainly welcome.